gentlemen, and Rajam of all ages, after a fair bit of theory crafting and some testing around with different versions of it, I have finally made an actually quite strong lightning build for Druid. It's a playstyle for the class that I've seen people wanting, and of course I did want it myself. After all, raining lightning down across the battlefield is just visually a spectacle, so if you can make it actually effective enough to justify using, then it becomes something extremely fun to use. The thing is, until now, Lightning Storm was sort of looked upon as simply the weaker side of Druid. Even the big storm magic builds were leaning towards using Tornado instead of Lightning just because of some synergies that its hit rate works with better. But I've managed to make Lightning Storm work in a way that I believe is actually offensively even stronger than the Tornado Werewolf build, even if it is defensively just a touch weaker, meaning it is less likely to clear a full tier 100 Nightmare dungeon, but it is a fully capable build that will decimate most of the content in the game. For example, the footage that you've been watching so far is a tier 50 Nightmare dungeon, which I completed with 1 death to be fair, and it's worth noting that I am level 85, so those are enemies almost 20 levels above me, which is a pretty massive gap, and I completed this extremely quickly, and I'm one-shotting most packs of enemies even then with a single blast of Lightning Storm. I set out to make this with the idea of just making something good enough focused around lightning, and instead I came away with something genuinely strong. I am so proud of what it can do compared to my expectations, and because of that, I am of course labeling this the Unlimited Power Lightning Storm build. So what makes this actually function then, now that you've seen what it is and what it is capable of? We will start off by going over where to put all of your skill points and why you should be putting them in those places, then we'll look at the spirit boons for the build, after which we'll talk about all of the legendary powers and the unique that helps focus this build, then some general gearing tips for how to make this really shine. Then we'll have a look at the Paragon board, how I've built it so far and what I plan to do with the rest of the points as well, and then finally we will talk about how to play this Lightning Storm build effectively and any tips that I have to make it even stronger. Without further ado then, let's bust on into the skill points, and surprise surprise, to start we are going with Storm Strike as our basic skill, as well as the base enhancement and also Fierce Storm Strike. This is just arguably the strongest basic skill that Druid has access to in general. Combine that with the fact that it is a lightning damage attack, which has proper synergy in our build, as this is a lightning build, and you'd be surprised how strong this can actually be in this situation. The main purpose of this is that it chains to multiple enemies. It has a 15% chance to immobilize anything that it hits, and a 50% chance to also make them vulnerable, as well as giving you a damage reduction buff for a few seconds after hitting with it, which is just lovely to have. After that, we move on to our core skills, and of course you're going to be putting 5 points into Lightning Storm. This is our core ability, and we're going to maximize its potential here. We also get Enhanced Lightning Storm, and then we're also going to take the Raging Lightning Storm enhancement too, which altogether makes Lightning Storm a channeled ability that consumes spirit every time that it strikes. The longer that you channel it, the more strikes it does, and you cannot move while channeling. However, the size of the storm is kept for 4 seconds after you finish channeling, which means once it's at max size from a singular long channel, you can just tap the button for a burst of the max Lightning Storm, move, then tap it again. And if you just tap it once every 4 seconds, you can actually keep the size of your Lightning Storm at maximum for pretty much an entire dungeon. Then we take 1 point in the Heart of the Wild passive for an extra 3 spirit. This is actually just a gateway to let us take 3 points in Wild Impulses for a 9% increase to core skill spirit cost, but a 15% increase to core skill damage, which is simply a positive trade-off. After that, we move down to the defensive cluster of nodes and we pick up the Cyclone Armor skill, which has a passive effect giving you 10% non-physical damage reduction, but also has an active component that springs out and knocks back nearby enemies, dealing a chunk of damage too. We also take the base enhancement, which slows enemies by 70% for 2 seconds after activating it, as well as preserving Cyclone Armor, which gives us a secondary effect where when you are damaged by an enemy, all damage that you take is reduced by 30% for 2 seconds afterwards, and this runs passively on a 10-second internal cooldown. Then we also take Blood Howl, its base enhancement, as well as the Preserving Blood Howl enhancement too. As a combo, this makes us a 15-second cooldown and a base massive burst of healing that also boosts your attack speed by 15% for 4 seconds, and any kills that you get reduce the cooldown of the ability by 1 second each. So if you press this and then instantly wipe 15 enemies off the face of the earth, you can immediately press it once again. Past that, we are going to be grabbing some passives in this area, 3 ranks of Ancestral Fortitude for 15% non-physical damage reduction, then also 3 ranks of Vigilance, which gives you 15% damage reduction in general for 6 seconds after casting one of your defensive abilities, and between Cyclone Armor and Blood Howl, you can keep this active a hell of a lot. After this, we mostly skip the companion tree as it is, because there's actually a unique for Druid that turns your wolves into lightning wolves, and I really wanted to make this work specifically for this build. Obviously, as it's a lightning build, it would be really thematic, but after extensive testing, I found it just just wasn't anywhere close to worth it. Companion AI is just not great right now, no matter what you do with it, sadly. You can't focus where or what they will attack properly, and they die too easily to higher tier content. Not only is their damage not great as well, but even though they count as lightning damage wolves with this unique, they don't proc your lightning damage passive, so it's just entirely a waste in its current state.
No dogs.
That said, we do take one passive here, which is 3 ranks of Nature's Reach. This gives you 9% increased damage against distant enemies, with that bonus doubled if they are also slowed, stunned, immobilized, or knocked back, and we have a fair number of ways to apply pretty much all those statuses. With that, let's move on to the Wrath node cluster here, and in there we first take Hurricane, as well as its base enhancement, and then also Savage Hurricane in this corner. As a whole, this makes Hurricane a sort of circle around you that lasts for 8 seconds, dealing quite a fair amount of damage, slowing everything hit by it by 25% for 2 seconds, and also reducing the damage of any enemies that are in Hurricane's radius by 20%. Then we take a whole bunch of passives in this cluster, starting with 3 ranks of Elemental Exposure, which gives you a 10% lucky hit chance to make enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds when they are hit by one of your storm skills. We also take 1 rank of Charged Atmosphere for free lightning bolt that strikes a random enemy once every 18 seconds, but that's mostly just a gateway through to let us put 3 points into Electric Shock. This gives you a 15% lucky hit chance to immobilize enemies that are hit with any source of lightning damage at all for 3 seconds. But if this procs on an enemy that is already immobilized, it will instead make that target take 18% more lightning damage, which is a pretty noticeable bump. Then we also take 3 points in Bad Omen, which gives you a 30% lucky hit chance when dealing lightning damage to vulnerable, immobilized, or stunned enemies to summon a bonus lightning bolt for 55% of your weapon damage, which is also then of course buffed by your various damage multipliers. Past this, we're also taking 1 rank of the Neurotoxin passive to make poisoned enemies also get slowed, triggering the bonuses from Nature's Reach super easily. 2 ranks of Toxic Claws, which makes critical hits with werewolf skills apply 15% of their base damage as poison damage over 4 seconds. This is the source of our poison damage within the build. Then 3 ranks of Envenom for 30% increased critical strike to poisoned enemies. A really beautiful little trio of synergy right here in this little cluster. And if you're wondering, yes, this build does use the Tempest Roar unique helmet to make your storm skills count as werewolf skills, so Lightning Storm activates all these bonuses too. Then of course we're going to be moving on to our ultimate skill node down here, and yep, this build is going to be using Grizzly Rage and its enhancements, but in this build we are of course a werewolf, so we will also use the Direwolf legendary aspect, which transforms this into a werewolf skill and also changes some of its effects. And so the full effect of this skill becomes transform into a dire werewolf for 16.5 seconds, dealing 20% bonus damage and also having that bonus increase every second that you remain in the form. You also get up to 25% bonus movement speed and up to 50% bonus spirit cost reduction while this is active, but you lose the damage reduction part of the skill. On top of this, you are unstoppable while the ability is active, and it also fortifies you for 8% of your health every second that it's active, and you can increase the active time of the ability by 1 second each time that you get a kill during this effect, up to a maximum of 5 bonus seconds. This is your massive damage window, no question about it, though this thing does still slap quite hard even when Grizzly Rage is not active. After that, we also put 3 points into the Defiance passive for 12% increased nature magic damage against elites, and then also 3 points into Defensive Posture for 15% increased fortified generation from all sources. Then for your final skill point, our key passive is actually going to be Perfect Storm, which gives you 15% damage bonus and 1 spirit refund when a storm skill damages a vulnerable, immobilized, or slowed enemy, which is essentially every single enemy that you will fight because of our other synergies and how they work. At this point, I should point out I absolutely did try a version of this based around Earthen Might with the legendary that makes this skill apply to storm skills, and it definitely did work, but I found that once I reached about 40% crit chance on my character from gear, Perfect Storm became far more valuable, and so while I've gone with this, as I think it is the ideal version of the build, and that's what I'm showing you, if your crit chance is lower than mine, then Earthen Might may well be the way to play for you. Either way, your spirit boons are going to be the same, so let's have a look at those. In the Deer path, you want Wariness for 10% damage reduction from elites. In the Eagle path, you want Avian Wrath for 30% times bonus crit damage. In the Wolf path, you want Calamity for 25% increased ultimate duration. Then you want to bond with the Snake path and take Calm Before the Storm, which gives nature magic skills a 10% lucky hit chance to reduce your ultimate cooldown by 2 seconds. Then also Masochistic, which makes critical hits with your shapeshifting skills heal you for 3% of your maximum health. This is our main source of healing, and and it works exceptionally well too. With that done, let's talk about our legendaries too, and quickly let's stop on the overcharged aspect. This is the one that I would switch out for our Mighty Storm if your base crit chance is low and you want to use Earth and Might, but it still is reasonably valuable, giving you a 10 to 20% lucky hit chance when dealing lightning damage to overload the target for 3 seconds, which makes any direct damage cause them to pulse out a chunk of AoE damage around them. As for the things that actually really make this build shine then, you of course have the Tempest Roar unique helmet, which makes your storm skills count as werewolf skills, and also gives you 15 to 25% lucky hit chance to restore 4 spirit. This enables the whole Grizzly Rage Lightning Storm combo, so it is somewhat of a requirement. I've seen some people say that this is literally just doesn't drop for Druid right now, but that's not the case. It's not true. It is still dropping. People are getting it. It's just one of the more rare uniques. So if you don't have it yet, don't give up hope. It'll come in due time, especially when they stop making so many Barbarian uniques drop for us. Frickin' Barbarians.
Savages.
That was a joke. I'm leveling a Barbarian right now myself. After that, though, we have the aspect of the Direwolf, which we talked about earlier, transforming Grizzly Rage into a werewolf skill, as well as changing some of the effects, and also we have the aspect of the Rampaging Werebeast. This makes Grizzly Rage last 1 to 5 seconds longer, and also gives it a bonus effect where any time that you get a crit while it is active, you gain 10% crit damage. This bonus will stack upon itself and keep stacking for the whole duration of Grizzly Rage, which is where your biggest damage spike actually comes from in the build, letting you just wipe out a field of enemies in an instant as you truck along. Then we have the Lightning Dancers aspect, which makes critical strikes with Lightning Storm fire out 3 dancing bolts, which home into enemies in the area and deal a really good chunk of damage. Those are the little blue balls that you'll see flying around the screen as I attack large packs of enemies. Then we also have the Runeworker's Conduit aspect, which makes critical strikes with storm skills in general charge the air around you for 1 to 2 seconds, which makes a lightning bolt just periodically whack an enemy in the face for a nice chunk of damage. With how often that we crit, this is pretty much always active, and so it's just a nice source of just random pops of lightning, which does a ton of damage and of course helps trigger our other skills. Then on our amulet we have the aspect of Retaliation, which in this slot increases the damage of your core skills by 30 to 60% dependent on how much of your health is fortified. This mostly just further boosts our Grizzly Rage damage window more than anything else, as that's when you mostly get a lot of your fortify. But then for our boots we have the Ghost Walker aspect. This increases your movement speed and lets you walk right through enemies when you have the Unstoppable buff, which we get from Grizzly Rage, and this lasts for 4 seconds after Grizzly Rage ends too. Then finally we have our defensive legendaries. I would absolutely recommend the aspect of Disobedience, which increases your armor by 0.25 to 0.5% every time you deal damage, up to 25 to 50% at max. A low roll of this is not great at all, but a high roll of this legendary can carry your defensive stats extremely hard. Then for the leg slot you have 2 options really, either aspect of the Vigorous, which I have and I'm using right now, giving you 10 to 15% general damage reduction just permanently when you're in werewolf form. It's pretty solid. Or if you have a really good roll of the Temerity unique that gives you a barrier if you heal while at max health, that can do a ton of good in this build. My roll on Temerity is only decent, so I'm not using it here, but this build can proc a ton of healing, so running that unique is a really strong option too. That's it for the legendaries and unique then, but what about gearing? Well, if you want to use Perfect Storm, you need a good pile of crit chance. I'm sitting right around 40%, which feels like a pretty solid place. My gloves also have bonus ranks of Lightning Storm, which is incredibly important to have. You want to seek this out because you have to keep in mind, while this doesn't look that massive on the skill point screen for each point, every extra point of damage to Lightning Storm itself is then boosted by all of your damage modifiers, our crit modifier, our vulnerable modifier, so extra ranks to your focus skill is an absolute must in pretty much any build, honestly. Then you of course want bonus crit damage, bonus vulnerable damage, and damage reduction stats are a good idea as well, as this build inherently is more offensively strong than defensively. I'd recommend any +% armor or plus damage reduction while fortified that you can get. On which note, as far as gems, you want emeralds to be inside of your weapons for the bonus crit damage to vulnerable enemies, you want skulls in your jewelry for bonus armor, then you want sapphires in your armor itself for bonus damage reduction while fortified. With that covered, let's bust on into our Paragon board. Head up the right side of the starting board to get the nice little damage increase here, and then get to the glyph socket in the middle, in which we will be putting in Fulminate. This increases your lightning damage for every 5 dexterity nearby, as well as the secondary effect of increasing your lightning damage by 12% to both healthy and injured enemies. Then grab the nearby dexterity nodes to fuel it up, the rare nodes that are nearby while you're here as well, and then you want to travel up the left side to get to the board connection gate. For this board, you want to be picking the Ancestral Guidance board. This legendary node itself gives you a buff every time that you spend 75 spirit, which gives you a 30% damage increase for 5 seconds, which is really quite good. As well, this board itself itself is full of bonus spirit on kill type nodes, which really help with resource management. That said, from the start of the board, head up and to the right, grabbing the rare node along the way, then travel and wrap around to the legendary node itself. After that, head up and left, getting all of the rare nodes along the way that you can until you get to the glyph socket right over here. Inside of this socket, you want to actually be putting the werewolf glyph. This gives you bonus damage while in werewolf form for every 5 willpower purchased nearby, and the secondary effect gives you a bonus 10% damage reduction while in werewolf form. Grab the rare nodes and the willpower nodes that are in the general area as well, then go back and exit this board on the right side. From here, you actually want the Lust for Carnage board. The legendary node here makes werewolf skill critical strikes restore 2 spirit, which of course counts our lightning storm, and this again helps a ton with resource management. Rotate the board like so that the ferocity rare node is in the top left side. Then take the upper path from the start of the board to get this rare node and all the magic nodes around it for extra damage with werewolf skills and bonus crit damage too. Wrap down into the legendary node itself so that you can get that lovely little power, and then after this you want to take the top path over to the glyph socket here, and in here you want to put in the exploit glyph. This gives you bonus vulnerable damage for every 5 dexterity purchased nearby, and the secondary effect has it make enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds when you hit them, on a 20-second internal cooldown. Just another really great way to apply vulnerable more often to more enemies, and it helps with boss fights too. Grab the rare nodes in the area and also all the dexterity that you can get your hands on to help fuel the build, then take the upper path here out of the board to get to the board connection gate, and add on the Thunderstruck board. The legendary node of this board gives you a 30% times increase to crit damage with storm skills against vulnerable or immobilized enemies, which is sort of our whole shtick with this. So of course, it's really great for us. Angle it like this so that the legendary node is in the bottom left corner, then head directly to this legendary node, making a stop at the rare node down here for extra critical strike and vulnerable damage, so obviously you want to take the magic nodes around it for even more of that. Once you've got the legendary node itself, take the upper path over here and head diagonally across, again grabbing the rare node until you eventually reach the glyph socket over here. Inside of this glyph socket, you're going to be wanting to put the spirit glyph, which will give you bonus crit damage scaling with how much dexterity is purchased in the area, as well as a secondary effect that puts a stacking debuff on enemies, increasing the damage that you do to them every time that you get a crit against them. This significantly helps increase our single target damage, of course, which makes it quite valuable. After that, you want to grab the nearby rare nodes over here, and also of course all the dexterity in the area to actually fuel the glyph, then head down and out through the right side of the board. For your next board, you're going to be wanting to get Constricting Tendrils. The legendary node here gives you a 15% lucky hit chance with nature magic skills to immobilize enemies that poison them for 120% of the base damage dealt, which is just a nice way to combo our immobilize bonuses and also get some more damage in the form of poison. Rotate the board like this so that the legendary node is on the top right side of the board itself, then you'll want to enter and take this lower path here, stopping just for the rare node so that you can get the 30% damage bonus to crowd controlled enemies, and also 4% bonus maximum life because that's just really nice. Then you want to path up and right using as few points as possible to get to the legendary node. At this point, you'll only have a few Paragon points remaining, even if you're level 100 and you've unlocked all of them, but you may want to consider shuffling some of your earlier magic nodes that you've picked up to allow you to make this final connection right up here for a few points to get to this wonderful rare node, Devastation. This increases your nature magic skill damage by 10%, another 10% if you meet the requirements, and it also gives you plus 16% damage to elites, which is just a really nice thing to have. And with that, you'll be out of points now, but absolutely overflowing with actual bonuses to your damage. That's it as far as actually making the build then. So how do you play it, and what are my tips for success? Well, the big thing, honestly, is just use Lightning Storm. Use Cyclone Armor's active if dangerous enemies get too close to you and you want to knock them away. Use Blood Howl literally whenever you can in combat. Same with Hurricane as well. It's just a nice bit of consistent damage and damage reduction. Grizzly Rage you want to activate whenever you have a big fight coming, like some elites or a boss of some kind. Storm Strike should only be used if you are out of spirits or in boss fights to proc vulnerable. Other than that, just spam Lightning Storm. The trick with Lightning Storm again is the enhancement that makes it preserve duration for 4 seconds after you stop channeling. The first time you use Lightning Storm, you need to hold it down for about 4 or 5 seconds so it reaches max size. But from that point forward, every time you even barely tap Lightning Storm, you will get a full-size barrage of lightning strikes for only 15 spirit cost. But you need to pay attention to the green bar that is on the skill on your screen. You must hit Lightning Storm at least once to reset this bar, and if the bar goes away, then the size of the storm resets, which is why you'll see me just spitting out a burst of lightning occasionally when I'm running around, even if there are no enemies near me. I'm just keeping my Lightning Storm as big as possible at maximum size. This also enables move moving. While using Lightning Storm, as you can just tap it and move, rather than having to hold it down and being forced to just stand still. The range on this is actually silly when it's at its maximum size. The damage is even sillier, and honestly, it's just a lot of fun to call down lightning to smite your foes with ridiculous effectiveness. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, a full breakdown of my unlimited power lightning druid build, and I hope you enjoy using the build for yourself if you try it out. It may not be completing a tier 100 nightmare dungeon anytime soon, unless you make some significant changes to the actual damage reduction, but the output that it has, the offense that it has, is silly, and it is a ton of fun to actually play. Let us know down in the comments what other kind of druid builds you'd like to see, and I'll take a shot at making it into a cool, ideally functional build capable of slicing through mobs like no tomorrow. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a